Well, despite not yet deciding whether to enter the 2020 White House race, former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz spoke with our own Neil Cavuto on Your World in the last hour, citing one of the big reasons he's running as an independent, the debt.
Don't forget, we are sitting with a $22 trillion debt. This president has added $1 trillion a year. And for all the Republicans out there that watch Fox News, let me just ask the question, where are the Republican leaders who banged on Obama for 8 consecutive years with regard to fiscal discipline, reducing the debt and the deficit, and not one word over the last 2 years? The country is not sustainable.
Well, you're right. Both parties have abandoned.
So, as you could hear, Schultz said that the two-party system is broken. Both sides aren't willing to work together on this. So what do you make of this, folks?
Yeah, you know, David, he's got some good points. I mean, if you're a Democrat, you're obviously concerned that even though he still, I guess, is a long shot, he definitely is going to impact, I think, the Democratic Party more than he would the Republican Party if he ran. But I will tell you, he's got a point. I mean, both sides of the aisle do have a spending problem. He could maybe bring in, you know, some additional perspective, being the CEO level that he was, about how he could run a business, how maybe we could get the debt and deficit down, how you can make some changes in the system to kind of at least maybe mitigate some of the spending. But the reality is this, Schultz still has a long way to go, and he's still got to make, I think, a lot of friends in Washington, because you're looking at a guy who's coming from a very, very limited political background. So I still think he's a very big long shot here.
Well, the very fact that he's coming from a non-political background is one of the things I think that's going to be in the voters' minds in his favor. He's not part of the corrupt system. That's why Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump did so well in 2016. They are not part of the 2008 debacle.
If he's going to make debt his pet issue, government debt, he should be made aware that absolutely no one cares. I mean, I care, but I'm told I'm not a normal person. Like, on the right...
I've never said that.
On the right, they don't care because they're in power right now. On the left, there's this new argument making the rounds that, hey, the 10-year Treasury is only 2.6%. Rates are so low, we should be spending more, not less. We should be spending on, you know, this or that program right now. So I don't really see any big movement out there to get control of the national debt, much as I think we should.
First of all, I have to push back on the fact that Bernie Sanders is not part of the establishment. He keeps trying to tell us this. He's been in government since, like, the beginning of time. So he is absolutely part of the problem and part of the reason why we're in this much debt. I actually love the fact that Howard Schultz is bringing this up. This is a serious issue, and it's one of the things on the Republican side that everyone says we're fiscally conservative, but when they get into power, that sort of goes out the window. And I actually disagree with you. I think that there are people who are fiscally disciplined and do care about this and think about the future. As much as people are thinking about the environmentalism and that issue for the future, I think people are thinking about the debt issue as well.
One of the key things he's got to do is make it relatable to people, saying, yes, you want to know why Washington's dysfunctional? Look what they're doing to the national debt, spending your money.
Well, so they're going to put it on a coffee cup, hashtag too much debt on the coffee cup?
Lower the debt,
when you create a business that employs 250,000 people, you can put anything
Steve,
you want
and that's always been the point. And Steve, the argument on the debt has always been it's going to destroy the living standards of future generations. And I think to Jack's point, as those numbers have gone up, and meanwhile, by the way, guys, the tax revenues have gone up at the Treasury Department, yet the debt and deficits have ballooned. As those things have gone up, the standard of living hasn't exactly been erased. So that's another interesting point, aside from the fact, too, that running as an independent with limited political backing is going to be a tough road to hoe for him. I mean, if he picked a party, that might be easier.
Donald Trump had no political backing other than a senator, a congressman,
but he ran as a Republican.
And won, even though he had no political backing on the Republican side. He was, by the way, the first third-party candidate to win the White House. He did a hostile takeover of the Republican Party.
But by the way, Steve, he wasn't the first businessman to run as president, was he? I can think of another guy sitting to my right who was a businessman.
I have to bring that up, my failure to make a career change. Otherwise, we could have broadcast this from my presidential library.
That would have been nice.
Am I too much of a conspiracy theorist if I suspect that my Republican friends are going to be spreading nothing but love for Howard Schultz for months because they view him as siphoning votes away from Democrats? Then they will find a reason to hate him at the last minute. Is that too much?
I think you're way overstating.
Well, that again is the conventional wisdom. But make no mistake, there are a lot of Republicans who are looking for a new home.
Okay.
Not enough to win, knock out President Trump, but Schultz, don't underestimate the Schultz candidacy.
Last word from another businessman who ran for president. Thank you very much.